I was cheated by my wife while on a business trip. She sold my seaside villa behind my back. I was thousands of miles away attending a business conference that had been planned for months. My schedule was packed with meetings, presentations, and networking dinners. It wasn't the kind of trip you enjoyed, but the kind you endured because it meant growth and opportunity. Little did I know my world was about to shift. In a way I couldn't have imagined. It was late evening in London when I finally got a chance to check my emails. Sitting in my hotel room, the glow of my laptop screen illuminated the otherwise dark space. Most of the messages were routine updates from colleagues, reminders about deadlines and spam offers for things I didn't need. But then I saw an email from Emily, subject line quick update. I didn't think much of it at first. Emily wasn't the type to send long emails or dramatic messages. She usually preferred quick texts or calls. I clicked it open casually, expecting maybe a grocery list or a reminder about an upcoming family dinner. Instead, what I read stopped me cold. Hey, just wanted to let you know I sold the villa. It was the best way to clear up a little financial issue. You didn't need it anyway, right? Love, Emily. I stared at the screen, rereading the words, waiting for some part of the email to change or reveal itself as a bad joke. My villa, my seaside villa, the place I had poured my heart into designing it to be a retreat, a sanctuary. The villa wasn't just a property, it was a part of me. I could almost hear the waves crashing against the shore, feel the sun warming the terrace, and smell the salty air that lingered in every corner of that house. And she sold it just like that. Her flippant tone added fuel to the fire. You didn't need it anyway, right? I gritted my teeth, trying to keep the rage at bay. The audacity of it. Emily had done many things over the years that annoyed me, but this was a betrayal of trust so profound, it left me speechless. I closed the laptop, my mind racing. How could she sell something that wasn't hers legally? She couldn't. The villa was in my name, I had made sure of that. But the fact that she thought she could, that she felt entitled to do so, spoke volumes about the person she had become. I got up and paced the room, trying to calm the storm brewing inside me. There was no point in calling her right now. I knew what she'd say. She'd brush it off, make it seem like no big deal. Maybe she'd even blame me, claiming I was too focused on work or too obsessed with material things. No, I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Instead, I opened my laptop again and started gathering every document related to the villa, the deed, the purchase agreement, the insurance. I had everything organized. Years of running a business had taught me the importance of keeping meticulous records. If Emily thought she could pull this off without consequences, she was in for a rude awakening. I didn't just stop at gathering documents. I reached out to the real estate agent I'd worked with when I bought the villa. A quick email explaining the situation and asking for details on any recent transactions. Then I contacted my lawyer, laying the groundwork for what I suspected would be a long and messy fight. By the time I was done, it was well past midnight. But I felt a strange sense of calm. Emily's betrayal had hurt me deeply, but it had also awakened something I hadn't felt in years: resolve. This wasn't just about the villa, it was about respect, boundaries, and the kind of person I wanted to be. For too long I had overlooked the little signs, the entitled remarks, the secretive behavior, the way she always seemed to prioritize her needs over ours. But this was the last straw. I closed my laptop and sat back, staring at the ceiling. The villa wasn't just a house. It was a symbol of everything I had worked for, everything I had built, and I wasn't about to let anyone take that away from me. Not Emily, not her boyfriend, not anyone. Somewhere deep inside I knew this moment was a turning point, the beginning of a new chapter. One where I stopped tolerating the intolerable. Emily thought she had me figured out. She thought I'd react like I always did, with patience, understanding, and maybe a bit of frustration. But this time she was wrong. This time I wasn't going to sit back and let her walk all over me. This time I was going to fight. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was angry. I'd moved past that into something far more productive: planning. Anger is volatile, a flame that burns bright and hot but fizzles out quickly. No, I needed something sharper, something colder. I needed focus. And that's exactly what I had. As I worked through the night, Emily had made a critical mistake. She thought I was predictable, that I'd respond like I always had in the past. An argument, maybe some yelling, followed by me eventually cleaning up the mess. She didn't realize I had changed, or maybe she didn't care. Either way, it didn't matter now. I wasn't going to yell, I wasn't going to argue, I was going to act. The first call I made was to the real estate agent. I knew he'd still be asleep. It was early morning back home, but I didn't care. I left a detailed voicemail explaining that my wife, without my authorization, had apparently sold my villa and that I needed all documents regarding the sale sent to me immediately. I emphasized the words unauthorized and illegal for good measure. Next, I reached out to my lawyer. Fortunately, I've always kept a solid legal team on retainer, one of the perks of being meticulous about my assets. I laid out the situation in a concise email attaching copies of the villa's deed and ownership documents. By the time I hit send, I already had a response confirming they'd escalate the matter and notify local authorities. That wasn't enough, though. I couldn't just rely on lawyers and agents to untangle this mess. I needed to understand exactly what Emily had done. How had she managed to sell a property that was solely in my name? Did she forge my signature, use some loophole I wasn't aware of? These questions churned in my mind as I meticulously combed through my financial records, looking for any sign of her tampering. If there was one thing I knew, it was that a paper trail never lies. By mid-morning, the real estate agent returned my call. His tone was apologetic, almost nervous. "Mr. Daniels, I had no idea there was an issue with the sale. Everything seemed legitimate on our end. Your wife provided all the necessary documents." "My wife doesn't own the villa," I replied, my voice calm but icy. "She had no legal right to sell it. You processed a fraudulent transaction." He stammered out something about double-checking the paperwork and promised to call back once he had more information. I didn't need to wait. I already knew what had happened. Emily must have forged my signature. It was the only explanation, and while it stung to think she'd go to such lengths to betray me, it also gave me an edge. Forgery wasn't just morally wrong. It was a criminal offense. The next call came from my lawyer, Michael. "This is a clear-cut case of fraud. If she forged your signature, we can have the sale overturned. And press charges. I'll coordinate with the authorities." Press charges. The words hung in the air for a brief moment. I hesitated. This was my wife, after all. We had shared years of our lives together. Could I really take it this far? Then I thought about the email, the dismissive tone, the sheer audacity of her actions. She hadn't just sold my villa, she had sold my trust, my respect, and any semblance of partnership we had left. "Yes," I said firmly, "do whatever you need to do." The lawyer assured me they'd move quickly, and I thanked him before ending the call. I sat back in my chair, staring at the phone in my hand. A part of me wanted to call Emily right then and there to confront her and demand an explanation. But what would that accomplish? She'd lie, deflect, and manipulate. No, I needed to stay one step ahead. There was one more thing I needed to do. I logged into my security system for the villa, which I'd had upgraded last year. Not only did it include state-of-the-art alarms, but it also had cameras. With remote access, I pulled up the live feed, half expecting to see strangers lounging on my terrace, or moving furniture. To my surprise, the place was empty. The realization brought a small smirk to my face. It seemed whoever had bought the villa hadn't yet taken possession. That gave me time. Satisfied, I closed my laptop and leaned back, letting the tension in my shoulders ease slightly. Emily thought she'd won, that she'd pulled off the ultimate scheme. But she didn't know I was already dismantling her victory piece by piece. The real estate agent was going to call her, the police were going to investigate her. And when it all came crashing down, she'd have no one to blame but herself. For years I had been the forgiving one, the problem solver. The person who kept everything together. Not anymore. This time I wasn't just cleaning up a mess. I was teaching her a lesson she'd never forget. The thing about people like Emily is that they always think they're one step ahead. She probably thought she had it all figured out. That I'd read her email, grumble for a bit, and then let it slide just like I always had. She had no idea that this time she'd gone too far. This wasn't a minor annoyance or a little white lie. This was theft, betrayal, and disrespect wrapped up in one neat little package. And she underestimated me. I imagined her and her boyfriend celebrating their ill-gotten victory. Maybe they toasted with champagne, sitting comfortably on the money they thought they'd pocketed from the villa sale. In her mind, I was probably none the wiser, too busy on my business trip to even notice what she'd done. She had no idea that the real estate agent was already questioning the validity of the sale. She didn't know the police were being looped in. And she certainly didn't know that I was quietly dismantling her little scheme with every email and phone call I made. The funny thing is, people like Emily don't just rely on deception, they rely on arrogance. They believe their victims will stay passive, too shocked, or too compliant. To fight back, Emily's mistake was thinking I'd remain the man I had been for years, the man who always put her needs first, who let her get away with small betrayals. Because it was easier than dealing with the fallout, she thought I'd shrug this off, like I'd shrugged off all the times she'd bent the truth or played me for a fool. But this wasn't a small betrayal, this was my home, my sanctuary, and she'd sold it to bail out some guy who'd gambled himself into a hole he couldn't climb out of. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became, not in the fiery, impulsive way, but in the cold, calculated way that makes every move deliberate and precise. The real estate agent called me back the next morning. He'd found the sale documents, and confirmed what I already suspected: my signature had been forged. "I'm sorry, Mr. Daniels," he said, his voice nervous. I had no idea. Everything seemed legitimate at the time. I didn't respond right away, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make him uncomfortable. Then I said, "I understand mistakes happen, but this isn't just a mistake. This is fraud, and you'll be cooperating fully with my lawyer and the police to make this right." "Yes, of course," he stammered, falling over himself to assure me of his compliance. "I'll do whatever you need." After hanging up, I imagined the moment when the agent would call Emily. She wouldn't panic right away, not Emily. She'd laugh it off, maybe even try to charm her way out of the situation. But as the agent explained the severity of what she'd done, that smug confidence would start to crack. And when she realized the law was now involved, her entire facade would come crashing down. Her second mistake was thinking I'd never involve the authorities. She always saw me as the rational one, the peacekeeper, the guy who avoided conflict whenever possible. But she didn't understand that this time her actions had crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. I wasn't going to argue with her or beg for explanations. I was going to let the consequences of her actions speak louder than any words ever could. Emily's third and biggest mistake was thinking that I still cared enough to protect her from herself. There had been a time when I might have hesitated, worried about the impact on her reputation or the fallout for our relationship. But that time was long gone. This wasn't just about the villa. This was about respect, trust, and the realization that she had none for me. By mid-afternoon, I received confirmation from my lawyer that the police had been notified, and were launching an investigation. Charges of fraud and forgery were on the table, and Emily would soon be receiving a call from the authorities. I could almost picture her face when she picked up that call, expecting something mundane, only to realize the gravity of what she'd done. Part of me wondered how she'd try to spin it. Would she blame her boyfriend, claiming he pressured her into it? Would she cry and beg for sympathy? Or would she double down, trying to justify her actions with some warped logic that made her the victim? It didn't matter, none of it mattered. The truth was out, and there was no talking her way around it. For years I'd let Emily's behavior slide, convincing myself that her selfishness was just a quirk, a flaw I could live with. But now, as I watched everything she'd built on lies and arrogance begin to crumble, I realized something important. I wasn't just fighting for the villa, I was fighting for my dignity, my self-respect, and the life I wanted to reclaim. Emily thought she could outsmart me. She thought I'd fold like I always had. But this time I wasn't just playing defense, I was playing to win. And she was about to learn that there's nothing more dangerous than a man who's been underestimated for far too long. The call came sooner than I expected. I had been preparing myself for how Emily might react when confronted, imagining her usual blend of arrogance and excuses. But when the real estate agent called her, the scene played out far better than I could have hoped. I wasn't there to witness it firsthand, of course. But the agent later recounted the conversation in a rushed and somewhat panicked tone. He called me immediately after speaking to Emily, desperate to cover his own tracks now that he realized the legal implications of the fraudulent sale. "She didn't take it well," he said nervously, his voice crackling through the phone. "Define didn't take it well," I replied, leaning back in my chair, curious to hear the fallout. "Well, at first she was calm, confident even. She said something about having your permission and claimed that there was no need to involve lawyers or the police. But when I mentioned that the sale had been flagged, and that you had proof her signature was forged, she didn't handle that part very gracefully." I let out a dry chuckle, imagining her face when the weight of her actions started to sink in. Emily was many things: arrogant, selfish, manipulative, but graceful under pressure, never. The agent continued, clearly flustered. "She started yelling, saying there must be some kind of mistake. Then she tried to pivot, saying maybe she misunderstood your instructions. She even hinted that it was just a small misunderstanding between you two, something I shouldn't worry about." That sounded like Emily, all right, trying to charm or bully her way out of trouble depending on the situation. She probably thought she could talk her way out of this like she always did. What she didn't realize was that this time there was no talking her way out. This wasn't a family argument she could win with crocodile tears or passive-aggressive jabs. This was fraud, plain and simple, and the consequences were coming for her. What happened after that, I asked. Though I could already guess. Well, the agent hesitated, When I told her the police might get involved, let's just say she didn't appreciate that. She started ranting about how this was all a misunderstanding, and that she didn't mean any harm. Then she started blaming someone else. I think she said her boyfriend was the one who pressured her into selling the villa. I smirked. Of course she blamed the boyfriend. When Emily was backed into a corner, she always looked for someone else to throw under the bus. It was never her fault, it was always someone else's mistake, influence, or bad decision. But this time her excuses wouldn't matter. She had forged my signature, lied to the real estate agent, and orchestrated the sale. No amount of finger pointing would save her now. And what did you say? I asked, genuinely curious about how the agent had handled her meltdown. I told her there was nothing I could do, he admitted. That the sale was being flagged and that legal action might follow. She hung up on me after that. I couldn't help but laugh, a low and bitter sound that echoed in my otherwise quiet office. Emily, who always prided herself on being in control, must have felt the ground crumbling beneath her feet. And this was just the beginning. Thank you for letting me know, I told the agent. Keep working with my lawyer and make sure all communication goes through him moving forward. Yes, of course, he said quickly, eager to get off the phone. I could hear the relief in his voice as we ended the call. After hanging up, I sat back and let the satisfaction settle in. Emily's reaction was exactly what I'd expected: denial, deflection, and a growing sense of panic. As she realized the walls were closing in. For years she had relied on manipulation and entitlement to get her way. She thought she could walk through life without consequences, leaving a trail of excuses and half-hearted apologies in her wake. But this time she had underestimated just how serious the situation was, and just how far I was willing to go to protect what was mine. Still, I knew this wasn't over. Emily was scrambling now, desperate to regain control of a situation that was spiraling out of her hands, and if I knew her as well as I thought I did, she wouldn't go down without a fight. She'd try to spin the story, painting herself as the victim and me as the unreasonable villain. She might even come crawling back, begging for forgiveness, once she realized just how deep a hole she had dug herself into. But I was ready for her this time. I wasn't going to give her the chance to twist the narrative. I had the upper hand, and I intended to keep it. Every call, every email, every piece of evidence was a step closer to ensuring she faced the full weight of her actions. Emily thought she could outsmart me. She thought she could lie, cheat, and manipulate her way to an easy win. But now the game was changing, and she was about to learn what happens when you play with fire. By the time the police officially launched their investigation, the wheels were already in motion. The real estate agent, clearly shaken by Emily's fraudulent sale, had handed over every document she had submitted, including the forged signature that she so confidently believed would go unnoticed. My lawyer, always meticulous, provided the authorities with a detailed timeline of events, complete with records proving my sole ownership of the villa. It was airtight, and Emily's trail of lies was now a matter of public record. I received the call from the investigating officer while sitting at my desk sipping my morning coffee. The officer, polite but firm, outlined the next steps. They were opening a formal case of fraud and forgery, and Emily would be brought in for questioning. The weight of those words hung in the air like a storm cloud. It was a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. I didn't revel in the idea of my wife being interrogated by the police, but this was the path she had chosen. We'll need to contact Mrs. Daniels soon, the officer said. Do you want to be present when we reach out to her? I considered it for a moment. Part of me wanted to see her face when the reality of her situation hit her, the shock, the fear, the inevitable excuses. But another part of me, the part that had been worn down by years of her manipulations, knew it wasn't worth it. I didn't need to be there. The truth was enough. No, I said finally, you can handle it without me, just keep me updated. The officer agreed, and after a few more logistical details the call ended. I set the phone down and leaned back in my chair, staring out the window at the city skyline. The sun was shining, but it felt distant, cold. This wasn't how I'd imagined my life unfolding. I had worked hard to build something stable, something meaningful, and now it felt like I was sifting through the ashes of what was left. That afternoon I received an update from my lawyer. Emily had been served notice to appear for questioning, and the authorities had flagged the villa sale as fraudulent. The process was moving quickly, and Emily's name was now tied to an official investigation. I could only imagine how that went over with her. Had she received the notice at home? Was she alone, or was her boyfriend there to witness her unraveling? Did she scream and blame everyone else, or did she finally realize the gravity of what she'd done? The reality, though, was that Emily wasn't the type to reflect. She wouldn't take a moment to ask herself how she had reached this point. No, she'd dig in her heels, spin her web of lies. and try to wriggle out of accountability. That was her pattern, and I knew it well. Later that evening, as I sat at home, my phone buzzed with an incoming text. It was from Emily. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. The message read, "Michael, we need to talk. This has gone too far. Can't we just work this out between us?" I stared at the screen, incredulous. Gone too far? She had sold my property without my consent, forged my signature, and used the proceeds to bail out her boyfriend's gambling debts, and now with the police involved, she thought we could just work it out. I didn't respond. What was the point? Anything I said would just give her ammunition to twist the narrative. Instead, I forwarded the text to my lawyer, making sure every interaction was documented. The next morning, I received another call from the investigating officer. Emily had been contacted and asked to come in for questioning. According to the officer, her initial response had been a mix of denial and indignation. She claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that she thought she had my permission to sell the villa. But when pressed for evidence, she faltered. There were no emails, no signed agreements, no verbal confirmations. All she had was a forged signature and a crumbling story. "She's not taking this seriously yet," the officer told me, "but that'll change once we escalate the case." I thanked him and hung up, feeling a strange sense of calm. Emily was still playing her games, trying to outmaneuver a system she didn't understand, but the walls were closing in, and this time there was no escape. As the day wore on, I found myself reflecting on the woman I had married. Emily hadn't always been like this. There was a time when she was kind, supportive, even loving. But somewhere along the way she had changed, or maybe I had just been too blind to see the warning signs. Either way, the person she had become was a stranger to me now. Someone I couldn't trust, someone who had no place in the life I was rebuilding. That evening I poured myself a drink and sat on the balcony staring out at the city lights. The investigation was just beginning, but I already knew how it would end. Emily had made her choices, and now she would face the consequences. As for me, I was done looking back. The villa, the betrayal, the lies. They were all part of the past now, and the future that was mine to define. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope, not just for justice but for something deeper: freedom. The day I returned home was unremarkable in every way except for one. I was no longer the man Emily thought she could manipulate. I had spent my time overseas, carefully entangling the mess she had created, setting the stage for the confrontation I knew was inevitable. By the time I landed, I was ready. I walked into the house late in the afternoon. It was eerily quiet, as if the walls themselves sensed the tension. Emily wasn't in the living room or the kitchen, and for a fleeting moment I wondered if she had decided to run. But then I heard her voice drifting down the hallway, unmistakably irritated, talking on the phone. "I don't know what the big deal is," she said, her tone clipped. "He'll come around, he always does." I stopped in my tracks, the audacity of her words hitting me like a cold slap. She was talking about me, of course. It was a conversation she'd had 100 times before. I imagined, confident, that I'd eventually cave. But not this time. I walked into the room and she froze mid-sentence. Her face went pale for a split second before she masked it with a forced smile. "Michael, you're back early." I didn't respond. Instead, I dropped my bag by the door and crossed my arms, leaning casually against the wall. "Am I interrupting something?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. She quickly ended the call and set her phone on the counter, a nervous laugh escaping her. "Oh, it was just nothing important. I wasn't expecting you so soon." "Clearly," I said, my gaze locking on hers. "I thought I'd come home and check on the villa, you know, the one you sold without my permission." Her eyes widened slightly, but she recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. "Michael the First can explain." "Don't bother," I cut her off, my voice steady. "I've already spoken to the real estate agent. The police have the documents. I know everything." Emily. The forged signature, the sale, the money, all of it. For a moment the mask slipped. Panic flickered across her face, but she quickly replaced it with indignation. "It's not as bad as you're making it out to be," she said, crossing her arms defensively. "I did it for us, I repeated, my tone sharp. "You sold my villa to pay off your boyfriend's gambling debts. Explain to me how that benefits us." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She shifted uncomfortably, her confidence unraveling with each passing second. Finally she tried a different tactic: guilt. "Michael, you don't understand," she said, her voice softening. "He was in trouble, real trouble. If I hadn't stepped in, things could have gotten worse. And honestly, you're so busy with work all the time, I didn't think you'd even notice." I stared at her, the sheer absurdity of her excuse making me laugh bitterly. "Didn't think I'd notice you sold my villa, Emily. A property I poured my time, money, and energy into. Did you think I'd just shrug and move on?" Her frustration boiled over and she threw her hands up. "What's the big deal? It's just a house. You can buy another one." "Just a house," I said, my voice rising for the first time. That just a house was mine, you had no right, no permission, and now you're standing here acting like this is some minor inconvenience. She glared at me, the guilt giving way to anger. Why are you making this such a big deal? You're overreacting. Overreacting. I took a step closer, my tone icy. Do you even hear yourself? You forged my signature. You committed fraud. The police are involved, Emily. This isn't just about the villa anymore. This is about who you've become. Her confidence cracked, and for the first time I saw real fear in her eyes. The police, she whispered. You called the police? Of course I did, I said, my voice calm again. What did you think would happen? That I'd let you get away with this? That I'd clean up your mess like I always do? Not this time. She sank into a chair, her hands trembling. Michael, please, I wasn't thinking straight. It was a mistake. A mistake, I said, shaking my head. No, Emily. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is burning dinner. This was a calculated decision. You knew exactly what you were doing. Her voice broke as she tried to plead with me. Michael, I'm sorry, please, we can fix this. Just tell the police it was a misunderstanding. I'll make it right, I swear. I looked at her, the woman I had once loved, and felt nothing but a hollow emptiness. Her apologies meant nothing to me now. Fix it. You can't fix this, Emily. You've destroyed every ounce of trust I had in you, and you're going to face the consequences. She stood, reaching out to me, but I stepped back. Michael, please don't, I said, cutting her off. I'm done. You've made your choices, and now you'll live with them. The villa is mine, Emily, and so is my future. You're not a part of it anymore. I grabbed my bag and walked toward the door, her voice following me, desperate and pleading. But I didn't look back. I was done being the man who forgave. The man who compromised. This time I was walking away, and I wasn't coming back. I didn't have to wait long to see the consequences of Emily's actions begin to unfold. It started with a call from my lawyer just a day after our confrontation. The police investigation was moving quickly, and Emily had already been summoned for a formal questioning. According to my lawyer, she showed up defiant, wearing an air of indifference that she probably thought would shield her from the gravity of the situation. She doesn't seem to understand the seriousness of this, my lawyer said, his tone almost amused. She's trying to downplay everything, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. Of course she is, I replied, shaking my head. That's her mode, deny, deflect, and hope it goes away. But this time it wasn't going away. The evidence against her was undeniable. The forged signature, the fraudulent documents, and the financial trail leading directly to her boyfriend's gambling debts. There was no room for excuses. No plausible deniability. She was cornered, and she knew it. The next piece of news came from the real estate agent. After being questioned by the authorities, he admitted to feeling pressured during the transaction, but maintained that Emily had provided all the necessary documents. His tone was apologetic, almost pleading, as he assured me that he had cooperated fully with the investigation. She seemed so convincing, he said over the phone. His voice tinged with regret. I didn't realize, well, I didn't think someone would go to such lengths. They often do, I replied, curtly, cutting the conversation short. I had no sympathy for his naivety, but I also knew he wasn't the one I was after. Meanwhile, Emily's facade was beginning to crack. Mutual friends started reaching out, hinting at the chaos brewing in her life. Her boyfriend, the same man she had sacrificed everything for, had abandoned her. Whether it was the mounting legal pressure or simply his nature as a gambler and opportunist, he had cut ties and disappeared, leaving her to deal with the fallout alone. I'll admit I felt a grim satisfaction when I heard the news. For years Emily had taken me for granted, relying on my patience and stability. While she pursued her own selfish desires, now she was facing the consequences of her choices, and there was no one left to bail her out. But it didn't stop there. The story began to spread beyond our circle of friends, making its way into the local community. Whispers about the fraudulent sale and the investigation followed her everywhere she went. At first she tried to maintain her usual air of confidence, but it was clear that the pressure was getting to her. She stopped returning calls, avoided public places, and even deactivated her social media accounts. The final blow came when the authorities officially charged her with fraud and forgery. The charges carried the possibility of significant jail time, and the reality of her situation finally hit her. She reached out to me, of course, leaving voicemails filled with pleas for forgiveness and promises to make things right. I listened to the first few, then deleted the rest, without even bothering to hear them. One of her messages stuck with me though. Her voice was shaky, on the verge of tears. Michael, the first messed up, she said. I know that now. Please don't let this ruin me. We've been through so much together. Can't we just start over? The very idea was laughable. After everything she had done, the lies, the betrayal, the sheer disregard for everything I had built. She thought a few empty apologies would be enough to reset the clock. No, that wasn't how this worked anymore. Emily's downfall wasn't just about the legal consequences or the public humiliation. It was about the realization that she had burned every bridge and alienated everyone who had once supported her. She had spent years manipulating and taking advantage of people, and now when she needed someone to stand by her, she found herself utterly alone. As for me, I watched it all unfold from a distance, detached but not indifferent. There was no joy in seeing someone I once cared about fall apart. But there was a sense of closure. Emily had made her choices and now she was living with the consequences, and for the first time in years I felt no obligation to fix it for her. The villa, the legal battles, the betrayal, they were all part of a larger lesson. I had spent too long prioritizing others at the expense of my own happiness. Emily's downfall was a reminder that boundaries matter, that respect is non-negotiable, and that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away. As the weeks passed, the calls and messages from Emily dwindled until they stopped altogether. She was busy fighting her battles and I was busy rediscovering myself. The weight of her betrayal no longer felt as heavy, replaced by a sense of freedom, and the knowledge that I had finally taken control of my own life. Emily had tried to destroy me, but in the end she only destroyed herself. The first morning I woke up knowing I was completely free of Emily. I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just the absence of her drama or the end of her betrayal, it was the realization that I was finally reclaiming my life. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the sunlight streaming through the curtains, and let the weight of it all settle over me. Emily's chapter in my life was closed, and now I was left with the blank pages of what came next, but starting over wasn't as simple as flipping a switch. The betrayal had left scars, deep ones that I couldn't ignore. Trust was a fragile thing, and rebuilding it in myself was going to take time. For years I had poured so much of my energy into supporting Emily, accommodating her whims, and cleaning up her messes. I realized I didn't even know what it felt like to prioritize myself anymore, so I started small. I opened a journal, something I hadn't done since college, and began writing down the things I wanted for my life. Not what Emily wanted, not what anyone else expected, just me. The list grew quickly: travel to new places, pick up hobbies I'd always been curious about, and most importantly, learn how to live without constantly seeking validation from others. The villa, which had once been a symbol of betrayal, now became a focal point of my healing. After confirming that the fraudulent sale had been legally reversed, I decided it was time to return to the seaside retreat. The idea of stepping back into that space was bittersweet, but I knew it was necessary. The villa wasn't just a house, it was a sanctuary I had built for myself. And it was time to reclaim it. When I arrived, the sight of the ocean stretching endlessly before me brought an unexpected lump to my throat. The villa was exactly as I had left it, untouched by Emily's chaos, as if it had been waiting for me to return. I stood on the terrace, the salty breeze brushing against my face, and felt a sense of calm wash over me. This was my space, my creation. And no one could take it from me again. Over the next few weeks I poured myself into restoring the villa to its former glory. It wasn't in disrepair, but it needed a fresh start. Just like I did, I repainted the walls, replaced old furniture, and added personal touches that reflected who I was now, not who I had been when I first bought it. The process was therapeutic, a way of taking something that had been tainted and making it my own again. But the villa was just the beginning. I started to explore hobbies I had neglected during my marriage. Photography was the first. I bought a high-end camera and began capturing the stunning landscapes around the villa, the sunsets, the crashing waves, the little details that so often went unnoticed. I captured them all, each shot a reminder of the beauty I had rediscovered. I also began to travel more, not for work but for myself. Italy was my first destination, a place I had always dreamed of visiting but never made time for. Wandering the cobblestone streets of Rome, sipping espresso at quaint cafes, and marveling at the ancient ruins reminded me of how much life there was beyond the narrow world I had lived in with Emily. Every moment felt like a reclamation of something I had lost. And then there were the people. For so long my social circle had been tied to Emily's whims. Friends I had neglected began reaching out, and I made a conscious effort to reconnect with those who had always been there for me. Grace, a longtime friend, became an anchor during this time, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this journey. Her support was unwavering, and our conversations often left me feeling lighter, more hopeful. Perhaps the most surprising part of my new beginning was the absence of anger. I had expected to carry bitterness toward Emily, but as the weeks turned into months I found myself letting go. She had made her choices and she was dealing with the consequences. Her downfall was her own doing, and I no longer felt responsible for carrying the weight of her actions. one day I received an unexpected text from Emily. "Michael, the first no, I hurt you and I'm sorry. I've been thinking a lot about what I did, and I realize how much I took you for granted. If there's any way we can talk, I'd like to make amends." I stared at the screen for a long time before setting the phone down. Forgiveness wasn't the issue anymore, it was trust. Emily had shattered it, and no apology, no matter how heartfelt, could rebuild it. I wasn't angry anymore, but I also wasn't willing to let her back into my life. Some doors are better left closed. Grace, ever the voice of reason, helped me make peace with that decision. Over coffee on the villa terrace, she reminded me that moving on didn't mean forgetting the past, it meant learning from it. "You've come too far to go back," she said, her words resonating deeply. She was right. This wasn't about punishing Emily or holding on to bitterness. It was about protecting the life I had worked so hard to rebuild. The turning point came during an evening walk along the beach. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, and the cool sand shifted beneath my feet. As I looked out at the endless horizon, I felt a profound sense of peace. I wasn't defined by Emily's betrayal anymore. I wasn't the man who had been blindsided by her selfishness. I was someone new, stronger, wiser, and finally in control of my own happiness. In the months that followed, I continued to grow. I took a photography course and turned my love for capturing moments into a hobby that brought me immense joy. I traveled to places I'd always dreamed of visiting, each destination a reminder of the freedom I had reclaimed, and most importantly, I surrounded myself with people who valued and respected me. People who celebrated my successes rather than taking them for granted. The villa became a hub for this new life. I hosted friends through small gatherings, and even rented it out to travelers who wanted to experience the same peace it had given me. Each visitor left behind stories, laughter, and memories, transforming the villa from a symbol of betrayal into a place of connection and renewal. One evening, as I sat on the terrace with Grace sipping wine and watching the sun dip below the horizon, she asked me a question that had been circling in my mind for months. "Do you think you'll ever forgive her?" I thought about it for a long moment, then replied, "I already have, but forgiving her doesn't mean forgetting what she did, or inviting her back into my life. Forgiveness is for me, not for her." Grace nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "You've come a long way, Michael." I had, and as I watched the last sliver of sunlight disappear beyond the waves, I realized I wasn't just living a new chapter, I was living a new story. One where I was no longer defined by someone else's actions but by my own choices, my own strength, and my own happiness. Emily had once said, "You didn't need the villa anyway." She was wrong. I didn't just need the villa, I needed what it represented: independence, self-worth, and the courage to build a life that was mine and mine alone. And as I sat there, the ocean stretching out before me, I knew I had found exactly that.